overly short and simple just because it is that, because oftentimes then that will lead you to not having enough to write about. All right. So first, just find a story. There are some incredibly thought-provoking stories in your text. If you look at the stories for further reading, you've got Steinbeck's Chrysanthemums. You've got The Lottery, powerful story about by Shirley Jackson, about crowd reaction, traditions, and our tendency to not question what we are told to do and what other people around us are doing. That mob mentality. No, that's not people voicing their opinions in protest. That's people simply behaving like a bunch of hoodlums in a mob, or, as in this case, just following along with what is expected of them, despite the fact that it may be indeed murderous. So you've got that. Oh my gosh, you've got Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been, about those traumatic teen years. Cathedral, incredible story by Raymond Carver. Really thought-provoking stories. Now, if you look at your text, you realize you have pure gold already. How is that? Well, if you realize that you've already got a number of literary criticism articles right in your text about various stories, Flannery O'Connor stories and so on, you can use these as separate sources. So I'm asking you to use two credible sources. That doesn't mean somebody's blog. That doesn't mean Cliff Notes or something along that line. Those are not credible sources. But you can bring at least two credible sources to bear. And that really does include a fascination you may have, let's just say, for example, with women's issues and looking at women's issues in light of the Chrysanthemums. I mean, that could be an incredible paper. Those sources are really up to you in that situation, what you want to incorporate. But you've got to have a strong, clear thesis that is your argument about the story. And here's where it can be a little bit dicey, I guess you say, because you have to come up with your own point. Now, the paper that you wrote about Rose for Emily was based on the comparison contrast. You still have to come up with your own point. Now you've got to come up with your own original argument that you wish to wage about the story. But there are lots of them inherent in these stories. You can wage your argument, make your case for what you believe the theme to be of a story like The Lottery or Chrysanthemums or any of the stories here. Any of the elements. You're actually making an observation in some cases about the story, and you're making a case for your observation. The setting and the storm help dictate the outcome of the passionate affair that's in the story. If you want to make that case, you make that case. Remember, you have the isms: realism, naturalism, existentialism. These fascinating ideas that you can incorporate into your understanding of the story. You have a great deal to offer in terms of your awareness or your studies in other areas, sociology, psychology, whatever it happens to be, history, that you can bring into these stories and shed further light on the story. So here's the way I sometimes put it, that in a sense it's like a discussion. I've mentioned this probably before, but it is like a discussion. You have a point of view in relation to the story, but it's not, I liked the story or I didn't like it or something like that. That's not a legitimate point of view, because you're not in any way enlightening any audience member. But you have something to offer, to bring to bear upon the story, and you integrate that. You bring that in to your discussion of the story. Then you have other participants in this discussion, not just the viewpoint that you are offering, or the argument that you're offering, and the support for that, the case that you're making for that, you've got other voices, other parts to the discussion. So it's like, I guess, a party where you've got lots of people there, or several people there, not just two, and not just one, not just you and the story, but you and the story and literary critics that you have brought in. And now, this is not a random process completely. You don't just throw in a quote gratuitously and say, oh, well, yeah, I found this that related to the story, only it doesn't relate to the point I'm making. No, I'm not buying that. The paper has to be unified. It has to be coherent. It has to be of one primary thesis, the connecting topic sentences that relate to that thesis. The case that you're building is still argument. It is still argument. And it is support for that argument. It is answering possible exceptions to that argument. It is, in this case, integrating other perspectives into that argument. There is no law anywhere written, I've looked, there is no law anywhere written that you must find some kind of agreement in your view of what a literary critic has written. Maybe you disagree, you've got that right. In fact, you have that responsibility to disagree. If you do disagree, not just go along with the program and say, oh, well, I'm just a student, and this is a literary critic, some famous person. Doesn't matter. We're not worshiping idols here. But you must make your argument, right? If, for example, to get back to chrysanthemums, if a literary critic had written something along the lines of Elisa in the story, the main character, represents the early roots of the modern feminist movement. Maybe you don't agree with that. Well, you don't have to. There's no restriction upon you. So there's a further argument. You've integrated the literary critic, but you have not necessarily agreed 100%. Well, there's nothing saying that you should at all. So be aware of that. Okay, I think that's a good start, right? First, find the story. Now, I suggest you generate a few points that you could make about the story, provisional thesis statements, and share them with me, especially if you're a little worried about this, right? This is not some sort of, quote, opinion in the sense of, oh, that's just what I feel. It is an argument. It may start on the basis of an opinion, but it builds into a case that you build for the point that you are making about that story. And there are lots and lots of points that can be made about stories. There's no way I can cover them all here. So I guess that's probably good enough. So I'm going to dismiss and excuse myself as the guest lecturer for today. And I will wish you well.